Thank you so much for tuning in to another episode of Unwritten. Today I have the amazing Amy Torseth-Teelan here.
Hi.
Hi, thanks for being here.
Absolutely.
So, Amy is kind of a staple in Baraboo. If you don't know, you need to. How long have you been teaching dance?
This is my 35th year
Okay.
in Barefoot. Yeah.
Are you doing anything special for 35?
We're kind of going back in time and trying to do some songs that we've done in the past, obviously with new choreography, but just kind of rewriting it. And it's kind of fun. I've got some second generations. So one of the songs I'm doing is the daughter's first dance, and it was the mom's first dance. So
Wow.
when I get to my third generation, I might have to hang up my ballet shoes. But right now it's still fun.
Yeah, that's awesome. It's funny too when I see kids now, it's like, because I'm at that age where the kids that I went to high school with now, they have kids that are in high school, and it's like,
Yes. Yeah. Oh, it is. It's crazy. And, and with like social media, I see things. One of the things we do is I give a free class their senior year to learn ballroom or social dancing together. They just have to find a partner, and then I teach. And I think my 17th couple from that is getting married this summer.
wow.
And they're all still married. I think that's a good thing. That's the thing. Dance.
Is that a metaphor, do you think, for a good relationship is knowing how to dance together?
I do, because what I always say is like, if you're playing games or you're bowling or you're golfing, you're always against each other. And if you're dancing, you have to work together to make it work. And then the more you do it, the better it gets, like anything else. But you definitely have to have that communication going on, even if, without speaking. And sometimes you do need to just say, okay, we're going left now.
Yeah.
And that's okay too. And how do you pick up when you falter? Like somebody steps on somebody's toes and that kind of thing. So yeah.
It's also, you're forced to maybe work through things while touching.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah. And actually, the closer you are, the easier it is.
See, the closer the couple is, the better.
Physically, like within inches, the easier it is, because what you're really doing, it's not really telling her where to go or your partner where to go. It's not letting them go where they want to in some ways. So like, that's not a good metaphor. But if your bubble is too far, you need to keep invading each other's space. And that's how the communication happens. And I guess maybe it's the allowing of that allowing that invasion.
Yeah. I wonder too if, as you were talking, it's the give and take.
Oh, absolutely. Well, especially like it depends on the dance. So tango was actually developed for two men, and it's about like a matador. That's the whole power thing. And then it turned into the women. But there is that give and take. Anytime the woman steps forward, she has to be the power. And I'm using men and women, but anytime the partner steps forward, that's where the strength comes from. So it does. It's a give and take. Absolutely.
And so you were married for many years.
Many years, twice.
Did you find yourself when you were in arguments kind of coming back to this whole dance give and take thing? Did you use it in your relationships? This whole
I think so. I would hope so.
it's probably in you, but I'm just curious because
I don't know that it was conscious.
Yeah.
But I guess in conflict, I would hope to listen and counter, and not just, to take in and actually listen to the other person, listen to that communication and feedback.
Not stepping on toes.
Well, usually if you get stepped on, it's your own fault.
Ooh, listen to that, people.
Yeah.
Say it one more time.
So if you get stepped on, it's usually your own fault. You've decided how far the leader is stepping forward, and you get the brunt of it.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Interesting. I'm visualizing Dirty Dancing, the dance scene now where she keeps stepping on his toes and
Usually he's stepping on hers, but yeah.
oh, okay. See, I wouldn't even know. I love that. I think that we all have our gifts, and we bring it subconsciously to every part
Yes,
of
and
our lives
foibles too, which aren't necessarily bad. I mean, sometimes our flaws could be the exact reason our partner really loves us. There's a saying I like that is, "Do not relieve the camel of her hump, for you take that away, which makes her a camel." So, maybe I'm lumpy and bumpy, but that's the best parts of me. I hope, so it just works when it works.
Yeah, it's so interesting that we're talking about this because I was just listening to a podcast with Marianne Williamson, who she's pretty woo, but I also love her because she talks about this culture that we live in, that if we take away the pain and the things, the process of it all, then we're not going to learn. It was really profound as I think about the news, and then I think about medication, and then I think about all the people that are on all the kids that are on medication right now, and it's how are they going to learn to accept their flaws and accept their differences when we're trying to keep putting them back in.
Those flaws will always be there. I think the word that we're talking about is resiliency.
Oh yeah.
You don't learn from the easy stuff, and that those lessons will keep presenting themselves until we learn how to take care of them, and we just have to expand that toolbox to do it. And I think medication has its place. I get that, but I think teaching with the little problems, that it's like, well, if I can overcome this, I can overcome the next, and I can overcome the next, or hopefully
the life lessons.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And I feel that when I was listening to her, I was thinking about all the life lessons that I've been through, and how for a long time I held it in a shame, afraid to show that piece to the people, that
because you're supposed to be perfect and have it all together.
Yeah. And it's the differences that you're talking about, dancing and the flow, and if you're always just stuck,
and the music changes. I mean, you can't do the same dance step to every song, right? So you have to have a toolbox of all these different steps and all these different cues and all these little nuances. But basically, there's 6 movements: forward, back, right, left, around right, around left. That's it. But think of all the different dances. Okay? So I think life is, that's a good example that it really is the same. We're all trying to move forward however we can. But how does that look with that particular situation? And it's hard to see our kids hurt, right? We just want to take that away. We just want to make it okay. And that doesn't necessarily help. It's helping them through it, not over it.
I think so, 100%. And I think too, in friendships, it's the same. We don't want to burden anybody with our problems, which is kind of the opposite of not wanting our kids to feel pain, but we don't want other people to feel our pain. So yeah, we don't want our kids to have it, but then we don't want to share it either. There's a lot. Mm-hmm. There's a lot going on in this dance conversation right here.
Yes, absolutely. Well, what is it, the song Dancing Through Life? Yeah.
I I 100% agree. And I think too, we can keep with this metaphor for as long as I guess I need to till I'm
35 years.
until I'm through it. But sometimes you want to go forward, but the dance is telling you to go left or right or spin around in a circle.
Mm-hmm.
You can't just keep going forward all the time.
Right. And sometimes you do. You just have to stay in place and make it pretty where you are. I do teach dance. But truly, if people ask, I say I teach kids. Dance is my medium because I can use body, mind, and soul, everything. And I'm fortunate in that I'm not in the public schools. If I feel like a kid needs a hug, I can do that. I don't have to hold back. I can choose the music that I feel is appropriate. There's a reason I'm not a nonprofit. I want that control. And maybe I'm egotistical enough to think that I've got the right ideas for these kids. It's been working so far. I mean, it's not for everybody, but it works for me. It's the creativity. It's the kid that's going to go forward, not the dance. And if you're a gifted dancer, I'm more than happy to send you to Madison, New York. Go for it. But mostly it's about the kids.
Right. It's about
the process.
And also having a business that sustains you so that you can keep going to keep teaching the kids.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So
it's interesting you say, well, I'm not in the schools and I'm not a nonprofit. And maybe that makes me, I don't know, did you say bad or something? But no, it's not bad. This is a business owner.
It's bad. It's just, I'm definitely a control freak on certain things where I just have a certain way I want to do things, and I'm able to do that. I mean, I think you have your own business as well.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's why we do that. And maybe it's because I'm afraid to fear or fail for somebody else. If I fail and it only hurts me, that's okay. But if I fail for my boss, I feel horrible. It's compounded.
Yeah. I find that with my business, I have to keep reminding myself that it is my business and it doesn't have to look like anybody else's business. And I have to keep working on my inner self so that all these ideas and expressions and feelings are shown for whatever reason. For me, that's been the hardest part is getting outside of the box.
Well, and I think that's super important for the way you do things is because you bring that out in your subjects, regardless if it's at store or whatever. I just saw you talking the other day. Why is it important to have a professional? Well, it also depends on what professional you get. Mm-hmm. And I think you looking into yourself allows you to see other people better.
Yeah. I would say that's totally true. Well, and one more part about, we didn't talk about this before, so but it's coming up, is the healing power of dance.
Oh, absolutely.
And I'll tell you my story real quick. And then I want to hear why you think it's important. So when I was in Santa Barbara for that month, taking my sabbatical, trying to figure out my life, I went to a Zumba class with all these fancy Santa Barbara women.
Oh, yeah.
And sweat my butt off. And I had like an experience of just pure joy as I was trying to. I know you say there's only 5, but I swear that with Zumba,
there's a lot of moving parts. Yes.
And last week I had a massage therapist on and we talked about the healing power of touch, but working through the body is so de-traumatizing as well.
Mm-hmm.
And did you find that, and do you find that with your students as they learn more about their bodies, that they become more confident within themselves?
Absolutely. There is dance therapy. And I worked with a counselor years ago in town here. And it wasn't disclosed, but I would take on girls who had been sexually abused, and they would just come into class and be a normal student, but you're working with the instrument that was violated. And so it was helping them own themselves, see themselves in a beautiful way, in a safe situation where for a number of years, costumes were completely covered for this particular class, long sleeves, long skirts, because she wasn't comfortable in anything else. And as the years progressed, she wasn't worried about that anymore because she didn't need to hide. You know, she was feeling safe. And I learned so much working with the therapist, with these young girls, that it is absolutely healing. Absolutely. I was totally ready to hear you say, oh, it was awful. They were all these pretty women. And I felt, there was nobody there with a cardinal applique on their sweatshirt as they were dancing at Zumba. But it was a good experience.
It was great.
Like, wouldn't you
because
rather
I was
do that than like sit on a treadmill ever?
Yeah, because I was so nervous before it got started, and the Zumba teacher looked like she,
I know,
worked out on the beach every day, and I felt so out of place. And then the music started, and she was making eye contact with everybody and, making sure everyone was having a good time. And it didn't matter that I didn't know the steps.
Yeah, you just keep moving.
I was just moving, and I was super sore. I remember the next day because it does
kind of like
things.
being at a wedding, where you're all just dancing together and having fun. And yeah, I love Zumba. I taught it for years.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
I just remember when Elise was teaching it at Tatiana's place. Yes. So I did it a few times there, but that was a long time ago.
That's been oh my gosh, it could be 20 years.
Yeah. Oh gosh, yeah. But it's still around.
It is.
So as we're talking about working through healing and trauma, you are recently widowed.
Correct.
And it's been how long?
A year and a half.
A year and a half.
Yeah. And my path was a little different in that, and we're friends. You knew Tim. Tim had been suffering with pulmonary fibrosis. And we first just thought, like, we were dancing, actually. We were dancing as a couple. And we did a swing and a rumba and something else. And he was winded after 3 dances. And I said, this is not normal. You should not be winded. You work out all the time. You lift weights. Let's look into it. Long story shorter is they realized he had this disease, and it's basically your lungs crystallizing. So he got to the point where, this is before COVID, he was being looked at for a lung transplant. And at that point, he was actually too healthy. There were too many other needs with COVID that he could not be put on the list. Move forward into 22, and he was on oxygen 24/7, pretty much, still working out. But they did another assessment, and at that point, he was just on the cusp of being too old at 73. But didn't drink, didn't smoke, exercised 5 days a week. I mean, he checked all the boxes, and so they were willing to take the risk. And so he had the surgery in September of 22 and never left the hospital, and he passed away August of 23.
And so he didn't realize that he wasn't coming home.
Oh, absolutely not. No, he was ready. I mean, that's why we were doing it. We wanted to travel. He wanted to, he had a lot of stuff he wanted to do. And we talked long and hard about it. And I think I knew it wasn't going to be as great as he thought it was going to be. There's a lot of things you give up. It's kind of like you're giving up one disease for another. Case in point, you can never swim in a lake or an ocean again because of the bacteria. You can't eat processed meat. You can't go to buffets. can't do the cat litter box because of those types of things. You are vulnerable. You should wear an N95 as much as possible. And some people don't do that, but he probably would have needed to do that since he had both lungs. And once you have a lung done, you can't do the other one. It is such an invasive surgery. It's almost experimental at this point, believe it or not, because it's such a big surgery.
I had a friend in high school. She's actually had 2.
Oh, really?
Yeah, because she has cystic fibrosis. And the first ones didn't last very long. And then she was lucky enough to get another set.
Wow.
And she's doing really well now, at least what I
How
see.
young was she?
Well, she's 43 now. Is probably her second set was probably 6 or 7 years ago, possibly.
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
Oh, that's so good to hear.
Yeah. It's crazy.
So it's an exception, right?
Yeah. Super healthy too. And I was asking that question about Tim because I remember doing his photo shoot and he was an elected official, but I don't remember what it was. What was
the county supervisor?
County supervisor. Yeah, so he had things he was planning on
absolutely.
Continuing
and travel and active and they warn you, like you should get your things together, kind of figure this out. And he literally did. He came out of the surgery and was sitting up and eating and talking within 48 hours, which was amazing. And then he tanked. He had an acute rejection, which only happened, I think the last one that had happened at the university was maybe 5 years prior to that. This is really strange. Doesn't usually happen. Overachiever that he was.
Yeah.
So
there was nothing that could have prevented that from happening.
No. And the other thing that we weren't ready for is that he was on the list. They usually say the average is 3 months for 2 weeks to the day of his surgery. We were not ready. I mean, I had packed his go bag like you do when you're pregnant.
Okay.
But oh my goodness, we were not ready any other way. So, but I had, when we're talking about the process of grief and moving through and going from, I had a strange year in that I was alone, but I was with him every single day. He was Tim, but he really wasn't. There was a time from when he crashed the first time, there were 3 months that he wasn't talking. He's on a respirator. He never was on a feeding tube the whole time. So, yes, it was him, but not. So I kind of had this ethereal land that I was processing, but not quite processing.
Because you didn't know what to process.
Right. And it would change. And it was up and down and up and down. But I really never gave up until we had a big, huge, as I would say, come to Jesus meeting with the entire team and his nephew, who's a cardiologist, who we just love and adore. And my daughter, Andy, flew in and we sat down and it kind of was like a whack aside the head that no, Amy, this is it. It's not, we're not going to get him. We've done everything. And just because we can keep him alive doesn't mean we should.
Mm-hmm. And so he wasn't conscious at this point, was he?
He was awake, but not talking, and not him, and it was so strange stuff in that, now knowing that we were going to talk about some of this, I was thinking back, I was like, oh, it's just a blur. And I realized that entire time I wore a smock, I wore an N95, 12 to 14 hours a day when I was with him. And I realized 3 days before he passed, I finally asked, can I just not wear a mask? He hasn't seen my face in a year. And I remember vividly his eyes seeing me without the mask. And it was like our wedding day. That's how he looked at me. And you just get numb kind of to some of that. But those are the little things that come. You're working through it and then something whacks you side the head and you're like, oh, great. Well, now I'm going to tank for the next 2 hours, but then you pick yourself up and move forward.
And what was your internal process like through this? And I'll give my example of when I was really young and teen mom, having the twins, and they were in the NICU, and it was such a foreign space for me that I almost developed a whole another personality. Like there was that stuff, but then there was this other stuff that wanted to kind of pretend like this wasn't happening, and I would go when I was home, I'd want to be with my friends and just kind of disassociate. Did that kind of happen to you at all? Or, I mean, you're obviously so much older and more mature than I was. So,
well, yeah, I can't imagine going through that alone and young. I think I actually was kind of the reverse. I basically gave up everything else of my life and just lived for the hospital.
Okay.
And thank God I have the staff and the friends that I do, they just kept everything going, the home fires. And I just checked out pretty much for those 11.
Yeah.
And then slowly coming back.
Yeah. And what's the process been coming back? We talked when we had coffee last time, I think we talked about maybe not, maybe I'm just making this up, but finding joy through the pain,
Yes.
Yes, there's pain and it's god awful, but then there's more than just the pain.
Oh, yeah. And I think one of the things that that was a big learning curve for me. And I sought out therapy. I did, it's online because I didn't know if I was going to be in Madison. I didn't know if I was going to be in Baraboo.
Mm-hmm.
And so I could do it there. In the hospital room if I needed to. Didn't end up doing that. But one of the things we discussed is that you don't get over grief. You go through it, that you live with it. It doesn't go. And I think for me, the thing that was so different is the grief I went through getting divorced and the grief through losing my husband through death. I mean, they're both losses,
Mm-hmm.
but they're very different. And, when you get divorced, you're like, oh, I'm going to get out there and I'm going to, reclaiming myself. I took my maiden name back and I was going to be Shira, right? And in this particular case, it was like, I didn't want this. I didn't have a choice in it. I wasn't ready, even though I had a year, truly had a year. I had a definite 2-week thing. I still was not ready. And then there's this, okay, well, now a widow is different than a divorcee. And to work through, and I feel like I need to be a steward of where we live. It was his family's homestead, the land. You know exactly where I'm talking about.
Yeah, I used to live there.
Yeah. I love that we share that.
Yeah. I bet I was thinking about you this morning as the snow was coming in. I'm like, oh, I bet she can see down the hill into the snow.
Yes. Oh my gosh. And a hawk came in and flew in and must have got something because it didn't fly back out.
Oh,
But, I felt like, oh, I need to be a steward. But that joy, like, get to see this, and how beautiful and what a wonderful place to live, and relish in the friendships that have sustained me and my staff. I literally just walked out the door and said, do what you can. And they kept the studio live and viable and exciting with no guidance. I just bolted, so taking the love and the pleasure of that.
And also living with, this is what happened.
Well, and we all know, right? Sure as hell, right? Excuse me.
No, it's fine. You can swear in the podcast.
Yeah. Oh, pickles. But yeah, it just it's all over.
And I think that's something I've embraced in the last few weeks, especially now that I'm moving my studio. I mean, I was downtown, but I was a block off.
Right.
And now I'm embracing this idea that I'm back around the people that I was around when I was married,
Mm-hmm.
and embracing that instead of hiding from that. It's like, this is just part of my story. There's more to my story, and I'm going to live it the best that I can.
Yes. Well, and we know death is going to happen for sure, right?
We do.
But especially in our culture, we do not talk about it. We don't, we might put together a will. Do you have a will?
I am in the process of getting a will, and I just got life insurance.
Okay.
So I am a
Good
little
girl.
bit above
The average.
the average.
They say that after a death, there is 500 hours of widow work
Oh, wow.
over and above.
That's a
what you
lot.
have. It is a lot, and it's overwhelming, and it's scary. And that was his job, all the financial, and we weren't ready for that. So make sure you do that. We literally had a book that said, I'm dead, now what? Like with the outlines, like how to do this. Never did it. Never did it. And you think you know what's going on, but you don't. And that was a big, and that's scary. I hate money anyway. I hate dealing with it. I mean, I joke. That's why I'm a dancer. I only have to count to 8.
Well, you are not alone in that. A lot of women.
Yes. And I was not taught by my family, my parents, and didn't learn it through either marriage, but I'm finding like, okay, I'm figuring this out. Have there been some hard knocks, some hard lessons? You betcha. But I'm doing it.
Mm-hmm.
And I've also asked for help. Right?
Yeah.
You are absolutely humbled. I think, with the gift of grief is that raw, or just you're just in pieces. Somebody's got to help put you back together, and you don't have the strength to fight them.
Yeah.
And that's a gift.
The allowing, the all feminine allowing finally makes its appearance of just, okay.
Sure.
When Ike and I got divorced, right, like a year or two before, I wanted to buy a new vehicle, and I was so afraid of making the wrong decision that I just kind of kept asking him, like, which vehicle, and finally I came up with a 4Runner. He's like, oh, those are cool. So then I'm like, okay, well, let's go test drive one. And I was so afraid of making the wrong decision that I let him test drive it. I didn't even test drive it.
It's going to be your car?
Mine. But what's better? It's better to not make the decision than to make the wrong decision. That's how I used to think. And now quite a few years have gone by since that point. And I make really hard decisions every day. Financial decisions, life decisions. And it's like, oh.
And life decisions for your kids, right?
For my kids, yes. And we are so much more capable of things. But when we allow, I was the same way. I'm not good with money. I'm not good with decisions. You're better at money. You're better at decisions. You should make the decisions. And then you're forced to kind of start making small decisions, big decisions. And it's like, oh, it's not so scary.
Yeah. And I ran my own business, right?
Yeah.
I could make those decisions, but there were that's how we divided our, having been married before, we had a lot of separations because I was independent. So like money wasn't commingled per se. And he had his, the money, the majority of the money was his, right? So like I didn't tell him how to invest money. It was his to begin with. He was a financial planner. I'm,
Yeah, I'm just a dancer.
I'm just congeniality. Yeah. So, but I'm learning. My eyes still glaze over after about half an hour of meetings, but
Well, then that's your limit. Then that's okay.
Yes.
30 minutes is great.
so yeah. And thank God I can Google stuff like, what's a Roth? What's it?
Yeah.
So
Yeah, when I started a Roth last year, and it was so easy, but for years I'm like, oh, I should start this, and then I finally did it, and it just takes money out every month and puts it in a I don't know, a Roth or an IRA. Okay, so maybe I'm not there yet. I'm getting closer.
there you go.
I did it myself.
That, you know what? And why are we so afraid of making a mistake? What happens
This
if you
is what
make
I'm
the
saying.
wrong mistake?
Well, we're gonna make the wrong
If you
mistake.
buy the wrong car, drive it for a year and change it.
Yeah, can you buy the wrong car? I mean, it's just a car. Okay,
True. I mean, you got to be smart.
Yeah,
making
for
it
sure.
has
Oh, yeah.
airbags, but
And make sure you can afford it.
right,
Yeah.
right. But like truly, right. If it runs,
Yeah.
you're okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, maybe that's the other takeaway. It's like the devastation of having, first of all, you were a young mom.
Yes, very young. Super young.
And then kids with very severe health concerns.
Yes.
Crap, if you can handle that, you can handle anything. Right?
Right. But we don't realize that we have all this power within us until we're forced into it almost. And then you realize that you've had this power all along. And
then don't beat yourself up because you didn't.
Right. But you don't know how long you have here. So it's like, okay, now I know I have this. I'm just going to keep going until, my last breath.
Yeah.
And I do know that there's people that are there to help me.
Yeah. When my parents died within 3 weeks of each other in 2017, and my mom had been sick for many, many years, and my dad was taking care of her and blah, blah, blah.
Yep.
He had a huge brain aneurysm and died. Like, I got a call from the police to the moment he died was 18 hours. It totally unexpected. We all thought mom was going to go. He was 92. When we went back to their house, he had a list of 12 things he wanted to do. And some were little, like, oh, I need to wash the kitchen floor. And then the next one was like, take the Sprinter and drive to Arizona. And I thought, that's the way I want to go.
That's
right?
lovely. Yes.
To that would be wonderful. And, the other thing that I think about too is, we always say, oh, I just want to go to sleep and not wake up. And my brother passed away that way many, many years ago. And what you don't realize is the havoc it reaches everybody else. You might pass peacefully, but everybody else wakes up the next morning and goes, what just happened? So, I think talking about it, like even like we are, just putting it out there. Yeah, it's scary, but we plan for weddings, we plan for graduations, we plan for all kinds of things. And this is surely going to happen too. And why not be a part of it? Do you talk to your kids about it?
So this is a good story. I had a mutual friend set me up with this woman, and I thought it was just like a networking thing, but here she has a nonprofit where she helps parents create special needs trusts for their kids. And so we were talking, and she's talking about this business, and I'm like, oh my gosh, well, I have a special needs kid. And so then we realized why we were set up. And she started asking questions. I started crying because I'm like, yeah, this stuff does keep me up at night. Like, what if something happens to me and my kids don't know how much I love them? If they don't have something for them all of it, you know, because it's just me
Right.
at
If
this
we're
point.
just figuring out Roths, what
Right.
have I taught them? Do they know?
Yeah. So, and it was keeping me up at night. Some nights I'd wake up and think, oh my gosh, you know, what about Drew if something happens to me? And, you know, like never really fully understanding like our life is really that short and it can end anytime. So after that moment, life kind of switched, and then it took a while to get the life insurance, but now I have that. I actually wrote a book for my kids. I mean, it's like a memoir and a journal, but it's also just so they know how much I love them. And yeah, the will is coming. I don't hardly have anything, but just the will so that the special needs trust gets made.
Well, I'll tell you something that Tim and I did, because I had 2 children when we got married. He'd never been married before, had a greater chance of being struck by lightning or eaten by a shark at 50. And we put together an ethical will.
Okay.
For our kids and my kids. And it was, you know, do you want them okay, say you pass. Do you want your kids to get all their money at 21? Like sight unseen? We're like, absolutely not. That's a horrible idea.
Yep.
You know, and we really ended up talking more about finances for that than we did for ourselves.
Okay.
Like how, you know, no, we don't, you know, if we died before they turned 16, we didn't want them just handed money for a car.
Right.
They had to put some skin in the game. That's what we ethically thought was important. And that was such a good, not experiment, but experience to talk to each other that way.
Yeah.
It's like, why don't we, you know, so that was really opening. Maybe think about that.
Right. And just
but your kids are adults.
They are adults.
Except for one.
Yes. When I went and talked to my parents about the special needs trust and the will, I was really surprised that my parents were like, well, we have kind of a half-ass will that we would put together 30 years ago. And it's like, okay, well, you should probably get on that.
Yeah.
First
Things
off,
have changed.
And then also it was really good for me to realize that, okay, I haven't been taught this stuff. And I'm learning and giving myself some grace through this process. And so that's where that's at.
And maybe you can learn with your kids. I mean, that's what I'm doing, is learning with them.
Right.
Budgeting?
Oh, I know.
It's about as sexy as a fart in church. I mean, it's horrible, but it is so necessary. And actually, once you do it, it's a relief. Right?
Yes.
You know, it's like, okay, now I know where I stand.
And I've made a budget a few times, and I make it, and then it's gone. So I really need to do that better.
There's so many apps, doohickeys and gizmos to help us do it.
Do you have an app that you'd recommend over?
Nope. I don't like paper. I still have a Franklin planner. No, I write. I mean, I do use like Quicken and things like that. And it's all online for my business, but
yeah,
I like
the business, but for you.
But for me, I have a notebook and a filing cabinet, and I have probably about 23 ring binders.
Okay, that's okay.
Because I'm tangible. I'm visual.
Yes.
Like, right?
Yeah.
I need to see, I need to touch, and, like make a list. And if I do something that's not on my list, I write it down and cross it off because I like, yay.
Yep.
But, yeah, no, I do it old school.
That's great.
And to just see like, oh my God, I spent $150 today on what?
Yeah, I know. So yesterday I bought a plant.
Horrible person.
I'm like,
plant mom.
I go from praying to God to I can get through the month.
Yes.
One day, and then the next day I'm like, oh, I love this plant.
It brings me happiness. Okay. No. Flowers are in my grocery budget. Seriously.
Well, they're not in mine, so but I should start.
My first mother-in-law taught me this. Lois, love her. She put flowers in her grocery budget because they were food for the soul.
Oh, that's really great.
Did I just give you advice. So now you feel like, yeah, that was food for the soul. I can justify that.
I mean, flowers at Aldi are super cheap, and they're
and
they're
that's
like
why I have flowers in my garden.
And you have flowers, yeah.
So one year for Tim, for our anniversary, I had flowers on his desk the whole year.
Wow.
It was this anniversary gift.
That's beautiful. How do you, well, I have one more question, then we'll probably wrap this up, but how do you honor Tim? How are you going to honor birthdays and anniversaries and?
Well, the prairie, actually, we have, at his memorial service, we had seed. You've done it. You actually had like little hearts that you gave when you same thing, but they were butterflies. So we had people write their wishes, and I'm going to be planting those. I was going to do it last spring, but Andy was in Kuwait. So I'm going to get the kids home and we're going to plant them. So we plant trees. Okay. I plant trees or have trees that are named. So I have a Timmy tree, and I have a tree for his mom, a tree for his dad, and a tree for my parents. And I have a friendship tree too that I got when I turned 40.
Okay.
So that's how, just little things, honor them, thank them. I have jewelry that represent them. So like if I need strength, I wear my dad's wedding ring. If I need financial wisdom, I wear Tim's. And being grateful every day. Just being thankful that I'm here and I was loved that way. And I feel like I'm still loved.
You are. No. Is there anything you would like to add before we wrap up? Did we cover everything you kind of thought we were going to talk about?
Yeah, it's just like having coffee. I can talk to you forever.
I know, that's fine.
Every time I get in my car, I was like, oh my gosh, we were there for 2.5 hours. I just think it's really cool that you are talking to people because our stories are important. Our little stories are so important. And, maybe that's the education that we're teaching each other, is that we need to share those.
And we have so much wisdom just kind of stuck in our heads. So the more we talk, the more that wisdom kind of just starts flowing, and then we connect. And, like there'll be things that we talked about today that I'll think about for the next week, and I'll
text you. Oh yeah, what about this?
Yeah, and it'll turn into something. And it's just, we just don't do that enough. I share our stories. So thank you for sharing your story.
Thank you for having me. Love you.
Love ya.